Previously on The Assassin Reborn as the Duke's son, the lion wants to meet the god of darkness, Aru. While in the temple, he's ambushed by multiple assassins, and he realizes that one of them is the person who led him there, Lily. She wants to satisfy her craving to fight someone like him. In his stead, the demonic sword Kirim wants to take on this fight. They're about to face off in a battle to the death against instructor Lily, but they're interrupted by the god of darkness, Aru, who wants to see our protagonist in person. But before we begin, remember that everything you are about to see is a fictional story. Do not repeat or attempt any violent or dangerous action you may hear. With that said, let's begin the story. People say that the god of darkness is evil. They say he shows no mercy. They say he justifies it as if it were consideration. And the god himself responds, it's something they wished for. No one chooses for them what's right or wrong. So if they can protect their own ethics until the end, that's enough. Everyone would think that logic is insane. Although he's only trying to protect the weakest, our protagonist thinks he's an idiot. We return to the scene where the lion passes through the portal. Arriving directly at Aru's throne, he asks him if he knows about him. The boy confirms by stating his name to the god of darkness. Aru has heard of our protagonist and wants to know why he wants to proclaim himself as his successor. He tells him that his fog power is very high, to which the god replies that there are two ways to become the successor. The first is if he personally transfers the fog stone to him, and the second is when the stone chooses on its own. Since the god doesn't know our protagonist, he assumes the second applies, stating that the stone has been missing from its altar since last year. Confessing that he's surprised to see how he was able to dominate Kirim. He himself didn't even know where to find it. Looking at him, he knows he's no ordinary child. He knows that the protagonist is a stranger from a timeline to which he doesn't belong. He thought that Aru was involved in that. He confesses that he's not entirely a god anymore. He's no longer all-powerful. The lion, a bit disappointed, saw it coming. Aru states that this is beneficial for him. A successor who came all the way to him will be less work for the god of darkness. He also notices that he carries the hilt of the sacred sword. He wants to know if he also wants that power. The lion smirks slightly, assuring him that he won't do anything with it for now. He considers that if the world doesn't know the sword exists, it's useless. As Aru stands up, he prefers not to comment on the protagonist's wicked hobby, asking his heir to the fog stone what he intends to do with his powers. He remembers what he answered when asked that in his past life. He said that he would live for his brother. That was foolish, although they didn't mind that answer in his past life and he doesn't know why. Aru reminds him that there's nothing more dangerous than blind faith. The protagonist thinks that maybe this god already knew the pathetic end the protagonist met in his past life. So this time, things have to be different. So the lion says he will use that power for selfish purposes. Just for himself. He asks him if he won't regret it, since depending on his answer, he won't take him out on the spot. Our protagonist is self-assured and certain of his decision. Aru wants to know if it's some kind of plan, something the protagonist doesn't intend to share. So as long as he clears Aru's name, it's fine. Then the god speaks with his daughter, Kirim, expressing his relief that she is so submissive to her new master. She gets a bit angry over all the drama, and when her father was about to give her a kiss on the forehead, a mist completely envelopes her, revealing that he gave Kirim her own body. The protagonist sees that she no longer needs his mana to be human. He's surprised by the god's magic. She angrily asks him the reason for that decision. He tells her she needs a human form to sleep with our protagonist. She gets even angrier, and the lion feels a bit uncomfortable with that statement. The next day, at the student's residence, we find Brian asking his young master about the situation he's seeing, because the instructor and Kirim, with her new body, are in the same room with a lot of tension, where both trade subtle but stinging remarks, provoking each other more and more, with the lion as the center of attention. And our protagonist can only watch as their cohabitation becomes even more difficult. So he steps out for some air. His knight doesn't want to stay with them, so he runs off with him, From another viewpoint, we see that the city is quite busy, and our protagonist can finally relax. He picks up a scent of blood from there. It's a young woman who has fallen while being chased by bullies. They want to use their magic to harm her. So one of the bullies creates a mana marble and tries to force it into the girl's mouth. Right before that happens, a classmate stops them, telling them they're too cruel and that they should be ashamed to call themselves nobles. He is Barrett, the eldest son of Duke Louis from the Kingdom of Garum, and she introduces herself to him as she is the princess of the empire, Celine. He releases the young woman and tells her it's an honor to meet her. On the contrary, she doesn't feel very satisfied with him and asks him to explain that situation. He wants to make her believe they weren't bullying her. So he grabs the poor girl and, in an intimidating tone, forces her to say that everything is fine. Frightened, she lies. Celine gets angry because she's trying to deceive her out of fear, so she tells him to leave. Barrett laughs at the situation. While he agrees to leave, he still wants to take her with him. He grabs her arm forcefully and tells her not to interfere in his business. She's just a weakling. At that moment, the protagonist punches him without warning. She's surprised to see him, and he's surprised to see the young woman. He recognizes that she is Leximus. Remember that in her past life she was the best swordswoman, in which both found themselves in a legendary battle. Leximus was considered the greatest sword on the continent. After graduating, she changed her nationality and her home empire. Each one launched attacks to eliminate the other. Both were extremely skilled, but the order was explicit. He had to end her life, and her talent met its end that night with our protagonist's dagger in her back. Though he infiltrated the castle in stealth, he also recalled that he didn't just want to carry out that mission quietly and quickly, because that level of skill deserved a real battle and for everyone to know about it. But now she's frightened. Meanwhile, Barrett gets up. He recognizes our protagonist. He knows he was on the front lines and invites him to intimidate her with his game. The lion knows that this mana marble game, if misused, is likely to completely destroy a person's mana. So the protagonist agrees and releases a bit of his own mana, telling him to open his mouth, scaring him off. Elsewhere, they are treating Leximus. Celine asks her to rest up so she can fully recover. She's very grateful to them, because they ran away when our protagonist intimidated them. Our protagonist calms her down a bit, saying he only did what needed to be done. That fracture and her wounds will heal quickly. She asks if she knows him from somewhere, because our protagonist won't stop staring at her. He makes her think he doesn't. Meanwhile, Celine wants to know which room is hers, so they can prevent future retaliation against her. It's a peasant dormitory. She explains that she got in with the help of Instructor Velton, who promised financial support, although he was suddenly dismissed. In other words, nobody's around to help her right now. She might be leaving the academy soon. Our protagonist suggests to Celine that she take her in as her own, and that she can also learn how to wield a sword. She thinks it's a boy and can't do it, but he tells her it's actually a girl, leaving the princess surprised and embarrassed. She apologizes for the mix-up, but says it seemed better for her to dress that way. Celine insists she's the one who should apologize, and she points out Thalian's idea is good, assuring her protection, the education she wants, and a good quality of life. She doesn't know why they're offering all that. Celine tells her she just doesn't like being alone, so Leximus promises to make her proud. Even though it was our protagonist's idea, he's no longer there. She's very grateful to the princess. The lion knows that the only reason she left the empire in his past life was because of Barrett's bullying and how he drained her mana with those attacks. Now he knows it will be way harder to beat her, because she'll be the best swordswoman and also have mana, though at the moment he's focused on other things. On the mission Lily gave him that morning, the first purification mission, which is extremely difficult, by the way. He was walking down the hallway when suddenly, an explosion happened right next to him. He imagines it might be a demonic beast inside the academy. What's strangest is that it's asking for him by name. Not only that, it knows where he ranks and who his family is. It tells him it's just like him. It's even 11 years old. He's stunned that this enormous figure is that age. He even tries to remember if anyone like that existed in his past life. As he brags about his physique, he tells our protagonist everything he's heard about him, confessing that even he couldn't get an S rating for his physical attributes, which is the highest, so he wants to fight him. Our protagonist remembers him. He sees the mark on his chest, which symbolizes Sparnia, meaning the rumor that the Prince of the Sands enrolled in the academy was true. Sparnia was a country in the middle of the desert. It was freed by the first prince, who was a genius in magic and combat. Even different empires struggled when they tried to conquer it, and in his past life that kingdom fell into ruin when its only heir died. They ruled it was an illness, but it happened because of his excessive training without considering his health. Back to the present scene where he comes upon him, our protagonist is a bit disoriented, because in his past life he never ran into him this way. The prince keeps pushing for a fight with him, and won't leave satisfied without a yes, but our protagonist stuns him with a no. He doesn't want to fight the prince. Surprised, the prince asks why. He confirms that duels aren't allowed at the academy, so the prince wants him to propose another place. The lion tells him their fight will be on the 3rd floor of the main hall. He didn't wait a second before taking off running. His eagerness to fight was obvious. That's when he realized the rumors about the prince's intelligence were true. He headed in the wrong direction. He'll use that to his advantage because he won't see him for a while, and he has more important matters than fighting him. Meanwhile, in the city, a subordinate of one of the 3 richest men on the continent tells him the preparations are complete. He's ordered to deliver them to the clients. He is Lord Zickerman. To the public, he's known as a kind man who donates to charity. But behind everyone's back, he runs slave markets and trades creatures of various species. So he infiltrates this depraved group, where he clearly spots his target. At that moment, Kiram senses a very complex energy from that target. She tells the protagonist that he's hiding something. Meanwhile, we see him peering into the cell where he's keeping what he considers his moneymaker, and we see a mist surrounding him. In a split second, a knight's life is taken. Zickerman orders his subordinate to catch him, but like a flash of light, the lion found it easy to attack at high speed, grabbing his dagger and snuffing out his life in one motion. The man is panicked by what he's witnessing. Our protagonist tells him he's going to do the same thing to him that he did to everyone else, leaving him lifeless. He wants to know if he can buy his life with money, but it's useless. All the inhumane acts he'd committed warranted his elimination, so our protagonist gives him his last minute to repent while he's still alive. Zickerman realizes that no matter what he does, he'll be eliminated either way, and cynically responds that the truly evil ones are the buyers. So our protagonist proceeds with his painful elimination. With a subtle yet powerful strike, he attacks him from behind. After that, he wants to check some cells. Peeking into one and seeing it empty, Kiram informs him she senses 2 different energies. He breaks the cell door, finding a human woman on the floor, apparently lifeless. But there's something special about her. She's clinging to a dragon egg. He takes the egg and brings it to his room. Brian asks in astonishment about the exclusive item he's acquired. Of course, our protagonist lies, saying he found it on the street, but he really wants to know who was going to buy something like that. He asks what to do if it hatches. The lion says there's nothing to worry about, because eggs require specific conditions to hatch, and without a mother, it'll just be a fantasy rock. Suddenly, the egg cracks. Both of them grow nervous, and they see a purple flash of light emerge from the egg. When the egg finally opens, they see a creature half human, half dragon. Neither can believe what they're seeing, and he realizes that was why the woman in the cell was protecting this special egg. He knows it's going to be a huge problem. The half-human, half-dragon's first sight upon entering the world is our protagonist, seeing him as its father. From the back, Kiram laughs, since the 11-year-old is now a dad. We return to the scene of the cell when they had the egg. They know the person who wanted it was bound to create a lot of trouble. He asks if it'll open. She answers she's never seen one hatch without its mother. Now she's just as shocked, because she never thought she'd witness that. But one thing she does know is that others might consider it a threat just by looking at it. The protagonist knows she's right, because this is no ordinary mix of human and beast. It's a combination of human and dragon, and both the humans and the headmaster will want to eliminate her, as will the dragons who can't stand seeing such a being. It's extremely dangerous to keep her, and he wonders if she's worth the trouble. Kiram suggests ending her suffering and the life of pain that awaits. It'll be a quick move, but he looks into her innocent eyes, and she calls him Dad once again, launching herself at him for a hug. He'd never felt that emotion before. He picks her up and realizes they'll have to figure out a different way, because he wants to raise her, something Kiram isn't too pleased about. Meanwhile, back at the ducal residence, Margaret is desperate over her son's well-being. She needs to do something about the lion to feel at ease. Her other son, Askell, approaches her. He wants to know if he can help her with anything. His mother tells him there's nothing to worry about and leaves. An informant tells him about the 6 knights found dead in the forest, and about the 7th knight who was with the protagonist in one of the royal chambers. The mastermind behind it all was Margaret, and after he entered the academy, there's no further news about him, which angers Askell because he already knew that. The subordinate is scared, given that he's never had subordinates who disappoint him. He has no intention of quitting, so he swears he'll find something new about his brother. He'll do it himself. Askell agrees and tells him to hurry. He wants to know what his brother is planning. Meanwhile, Lily heads to the royal chamber, finding them in a rather unusual situation. She asks about the baby. It's a long story, which can be discussed some other time, because there's something more important right now. He looks at her a bit anxiously, because there's an order signed by the Academy approving a duel. She reminds him he was supposed to keep a low profile, scolding him for drawing attention. Kiram doesn't see the problem. It's just 2 11-year-olds fighting. He tells her the boy is no ordinary child. He wants to know when the duel will take place. Lily informs him it's in 2 hours. The lion is worried because it's much sooner than he thought. When he arrives at the duel, he finds a prince eager for battle. Our protagonist, on the other hand, just wants it over. The prince wants to know if the lion will use magic. The protagonist will only use it if he does. He smirks and rushes forward to attack. With a swift leap and a huge sword, he launches his first strike. As he attacks, our protagonist thinks he's a bit faster than expected, but it's still a slow attack, easily deflected. He knows that for an opponent like him, strength isn't necessary, but rather sharpness and precision. Evading the prince's attacks, in the midst of those strikes, he notices what the protagonist is doing. He's only using the same downward thrust, so in a swift move, the prince is behind him, and just as he's about to strike him, the protagonist sheathes his sword and grabs his leg, making him crash heavily in front of him. He cushions the impact with his hands, and with rising anger, immediately tries a kick. The lion dodges it with ease but is surprised by his agility despite his size. Everyone watches that move in astonishment. After that kick, the young prince is once again face to face with the protagonist, and something within him likes that this battle will be at a real level, because losing in swordplay won't stop him from doing whatever it takes to win. The lion is unsettled by how heavy this guy is. A flash of yellow energy radiates from his aura. He's going all in. Meanwhile, Dean Bartolome observes that they're now using magic, finding it a bit bold for such young fighters. Lily comments on the protagonist's victory in swordsmanship. The dean points out their respective battle ratings, making the instructor's observation obvious. But on the other hand, the prince's mana level is higher, or at least that's what the dean thinks. He's intrigued by the fight, and Lily is concerned, not wanting him to go overboard. Meanwhile, he summons his ability, the Fist of Death. The lion sees the battle has now shifted to magic, dodging the fist, but the prince has no intention of letting him escape. Use another spell to destabilize him while the protagonist runs. He knows his opponent is rated as a 3-star mage, although with that attack he must be more than that. He suspects the instructors maintaining the barrier might be struggling. The prince wants him to fight, not keep running. The lion doesn't seem to comply just yet, which makes the prince even angrier, provoking him to use a level 4 mana spell. The dean and the instructor are shocked. His sandstorm ability is aimed directly at the protagonist. There's no escape this time, so he'll have to face the attack head-on. On the other hand, there's a bottle of milk. Brian checks the temperature, deciding it's perfect for the baby. He's glad he took care of his siblings before. Now he has the experience. He calls the creature and notices it's growing rapidly. Meanwhile, back at the duel, everyone watches as the inside of the dome becomes entirely covered by the prince's magic attack, which worries the instructors. They know this barrier won't last long. They can't believe those 2 students are this powerful. Lily wants the dean to intervene in the attack, but he's waiting to see something special. The lion uses the secret technique of the void sphere, leaving her astonished. All the prince's magic attack is being absorbed into it. The dean grows more impressed with the protagonist, but she's even more stunned that he's using that here. The spell suddenly vanishes, thanks to the protagonist's decision. The prince has no idea what just happened. Neither does the audience. No one had ever heard of this dark magic before. The lion asks if his rival wants to keep fighting. Still in shock, the prince surrenders. He can't believe he lost in both swordsmanship and magic. The protagonist feels a bit bad but uses it as extra motivation. The prince gets up and offers his hand, saying he hopes to face him again one day. This time, the protagonist refuses. Meanwhile, he's shocked to see her. He knows dragon growth is fast, but she already looks like she's 6 years old. He's amazed at how quickly even a half-dragon can grow. He realizes it will be harder to keep this a secret. Eventually, he won't be able to hide her. Lily can't help him with everything, especially after drawing so much attention during the duel. Kiram wakes up because of the commotion. The instructor can't believe how fast-paced everything has been. She criticizes the protagonist for bringing back creatures from his missions, saying it'll be tough to keep them hidden. He tells her Brian will handle the care of the creature. He also placed a barrier in the dorm to conceal Kiram's aura and that of the creature. She thinks it's a solid plan, but only if he hadn't drawn so much attention to himself. She hands him a letter, and he feels disappointed by the reward for winning the duel. As Lily leaves the room, she warns him that drawing too much attention is never good. She tells both of them that it's a warning letter saying he's at risk of expulsion for misconduct. Brian and the half-dragon are alarmed by this news. She asks her father if they'll have to live on the streets. The protagonist is genuinely surprised by how fast she's growing. He strokes her head to calm her down. The lion explains to Brian that it's not as serious as it sounds. The letter is signed by the dean, not the administrative office. The dean likely wants to meet him in person and use this as a subtle excuse. He recalls how, in his past life, the dean once asked if he wanted to join the Knights of Light. At that time, the protagonist was determined to live for his brother. Bartolome knew it wasn't the best decision and gave him advice. There's no benefit in joining. You'd just be a puppet. The protagonist suspects the dean will probably say the same thing now. While stroking the girl, Brian suggests a name for her, Mia. The protagonist agrees, and little Mia Everflame loves it. Where does she learn these things? The lion wonders. In the office of the Royal Academy, the dean is hard at work. Bartolome reflects on the duel he witnessed, particularly how that level 1 void sphere overpowered a level 4 spell. He noticed it didn't even take much effort. He wants to know Thalian's limits. Bartolome, who was the master of the current emperor and father of the former empress, is one of the few 9-star mages on the continent. Since his daughter's death, the Royal Academy has focused on cultivating talent. We see the protagonist walking toward his office, thinking about what Bartolome was like in his past life and the mentality he had. When he knocks, he realizes what he's up against, a 9-star access restriction barrier. He knows this is a test he must solve. Bartolome is curious to see what the protagonist will do. The only way to break it is to have the power of a grand mage. But, to Bartolome's surprise, the protagonist enters through the window, bypassing the director entirely. Once inside, he introduces himself and states his purpose. The dean goes along with it, even though he knows he's being played. The lion explains how he figured out the dean wanted to meet him and why he entered through the window. He knew it was a test of his talent. The dean congratulates him for proving his efficiency. However, he won't tear up the warning letter unless the protagonist convinces him otherwise. Without hesitation, the protagonist asks if he wants the empire to thrive or if he cares more about family honor. The dean frowns, unsure of where this is going. The protagonist explains that both his family and the academy are on the brink of ruin. Bartolome grows furious, feeling disrespected. As he glares at the protagonist, he recalls moments from his past life, the contributions he made to help the first prince become emperor, only for that same emperor to eliminate his own siblings out of sheer ambition. When Bartolome opposed it, he was labeled a traitor and executed. He mutters, "That sounds absurd. The peace they've known for over 100 years won't crumble out of nowhere." Bartolome thinks he might have been wrong about the protagonist, assuming he was just a talented kid. But the protagonist, with precise arguments, explains the current situation regarding the families and their conflicts. He assures Bartolome that the day peace falls, it will take the academy down with it. The dean can't believe how an 11-year-old boy can be so coherent and precise in his vision. He asks what the protagonist wants. The protagonist replies that, in exchange for maintaining peace within the family and the academy, he should revoke his warning letter. The dean notices a flicker of aura on the ceiling. Bartolome casts his Chains of Judgment spell to punish the boy's arrogance, trapping him with level 9 magic. The lion feels a bit excited, thinking the dean wants to fight him. He knows he won't be able to escape from it, but he couldn't be more wrong. The protagonist is determined to prove himself. He once again summons the Void Sphere spell. It surrounds the chains, though the dean dismisses it as pointless. A level 1 spell won't break his magic chains. However, the Void Sphere absorbs Bartolome's entire spell, completely enveloping it in a sphere of dark power. The dean is impressed by what he's witnessing. When the sphere finishes its release, the lion asks if he considers him useful now. The dean agrees to revoke the warning letter, though he also wonders if that's all the protagonist wants. The lion replies that all he wants is peace. He doesn't want to see the academy fall as it did in his past life. Meanwhile, the city falls under the glow of the sunset. Brian is carrying his grocery bags home, along with plenty of snacks for Mia. He imagines her eating them and feels happy, but he notices the city is strangely quiet. Feeling slightly nervous, he glances at an alleyway he's passing by. A man steps out, someone Brian seems to recognize. The man vanishes, leaving behind only the groceries. After his conversation with the dean, the protagonist resumes his classes. But he's really bored. He's learning things he mastered 30 years ago, so he decides to leave and train instead. But Princess Celine interrupts him, wanting to know where he's going. He lies, saying he's heading to the bathroom, though she clearly doesn't believe him. He changes the subject by talking about Leximus. He asks why she lets him call her by her name when she's the princess. As they descend the stairs, the sound of 2 sets of footsteps echoes. 2 figures recognize her immediately. Celine looks a bit nervous upon seeing them. They comment that they haven't seen her in a while. It's Michael and Grover. She bows when she sees them. They waste no time criticizing her, talking about her mingling with commoners. The protagonist picks up on the fact that they're related to Celine. When they see the lion, they recognize him right away. He introduces himself to them. Michael and Grover shower him with praise for his performance in the duel, completely ignoring Celine. They try to strike up a friendship with him, inviting him to an event. As they leave, Celine is stunned by how ignored she was. Grover steps closer just to inform her that she's not invited. She silently seethes with anger as they mock her while walking away. Leximus asks about them, and she confesses they share the same bloodline. To help ease her humiliation and frustration, the protagonist tells her she's better than them. Her power makes them distrust her, and that's why they treat her like that. He advises her not to let it get her down. Celine blushes at his words. As he leaves, Leximus tries to bring her back to reality. Elsewhere, the protagonist returns to find Mia, but the room is empty. He summons Kiram and orders her to look for Brian. Kiram gets annoyed, saying she's not a dog to do his errands, but she smells blood and grows tense. The protagonist fears something might have happened. He rushes down a hallway where a gang of thugs approaches Brian. They make it clear that Brian is a nuisance to them. Brian is in no condition to defend himself. Barrett taunts him, explaining how he'll kill and torture him before ultimately sending his remains to the protagonist. He tells Brian this is all because the lion humiliated him before. Despite his suffering, Brian simply replies, "That's fine." Barrett is taken aback and frowns, unsure of what Brian means. Brian starts laughing, thinking it's some kind of joke. Barrett wants to prove it's not a joke and orders one of his men to kill Brian. Alright, guys, we're going to leave it here for today. We'll continue the story in the next video. This series will consist of several short chapters, but if you'd like to keep reading, check the details of the story in the replies under the pinned comment below. If you enjoyed the video, a like and a positive comment would help me a ton to keep bringing more content. That said, take care, stay safe, and see you next time.